You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome back to Cards to the Moon. This is episode 110, and my name is Clark from 5 Card Guys on Instagram and 5cardguys.com. With me co-hosting as usual is Hyung of Integrity Sports Cards, but missing in action for today's show is John, who should be back next week. So off the top, I thought our listeners would be interested in getting an update on your recent PSA submission, Hyung, that you got back, and one of those cards I'm really want you to talk about was the Max Verstappen Black Raywave 1 of 1, which you cracked out of the BGS 8.5 slab, if I'm not mistaken.
Jeez, it was an ugly slab. I just gotta say, the silver
the
labels.
8.5,
yeah, the 8.5 was bugging me. So, but the subgrades were that the edges were like a 7, or that's the reason why. So everything else had good subgrades. So I just, I cracked it out. I took a closer look, and I said, you know what? This thing actually looks pretty decent. I obviously did the inspection beforehand. I didn't really see any red flags that were like, okay, this is the reason why it got 8.5. So I ended up cracking it because I don't like BGS slabs personally. I think the reflection is different on BGS slabs, you know what I mean? Okay. And PSA slabs, I think, just hit different. And for especially that card, it made sense too, because like on PSA's label, for instance, it labels 1 of 1.
Right.
Where BGS labeled it
didn't.
Yeah, Black Raywave. And then, you know what I mean? And that's all they labeled it. So people don't realize that it is a 1 of 1. So I thought that also brought a lot of value, but it ended up getting bumped to a PSA 9, which I was very, very, very happy about. It looks, it's shinier. Like when the light shines on it, it just looks like a better card. I'm super happy with kind of like the results. That's what I was hoping for. Outside chance at a PSA 10, but I'm sure that would have went viral if it was a PSA 10.
the 9's pretty good though. Wow.
Yeah, I'll take the 9. I'll take the 9.
So the subgrades for the BGC 8.5, it was the edges that was the lowest?
Yes, it was the edges. So
Weird.
That's why I took a close look in the slab first. So I was like, is it worth it? Like maybe there's like a huge like a dent or something in the edge that, I could see in. I've done that before in the past. Like, oh, this is the reason why there's no point on some, So I thought it looked pretty clean. So I thought it was worth, and I was bored a bit. I always wanted to do it on a kind of like a card that made sense to do it. Sure. And, with the news with the white labels of BGS not
going away?
Yeah, with it going away. So it was like, I don't even want the silver labels either.
Hyung wants gold on all the numbers.
Yeah, BGS 9.5s that's it. Anything else, I'd rather have a PSA slab.
Yeah, nice. No, that was a good crossover. I mean, I'm glad you brought that point. I guess out of the 4 subgrades, if one of them you should feel the most confident about in most cases, I think if it was on edges, I feel better about cracking it and resubmitting, right? Like centering, you can't do anything about. Yeah. Surface.
I think a lot of people do think that like if they see a BGS slab that has like a 9 centering, for instance, and then subgrades are 9.5 in all the other ones, they would think it's a good PSA candidate because PSA is more lenient with their centering than a BGS or a SGC, right? So I think a lot of people have that kind of like mentality where PSA grades more lenient on centering, so surface and corners and edges matter more and stuff like that.
But interesting.
Yeah, I don't really find any absolute truth because, like I said, it's a coin flip at the end of the day. Because
fair enough.
You know what I mean? We've always said it. And I'm either happy or pissed off at PSA depending on my grades. So last time I dogged them, but it was a good experience this time. I will say this: the customer service has been a lot better with PSA. The whole process has been better. Even the submission process, the whole communication process, the speed. We did submit the express, so we submitted 4 cards express at $150 a pop.
Right.
And we did so. Our buddy Jared Cito, he had the Topps Julio SSP,
right?
The update
with
Ichiro. Yeah, that ended up PSA 10ing for him, so I was super happy about that one. Yeah, it looked great. Centering was great, so I expected it to 10. Would have been pretty disappointed if it didn't. And then we sent. I actually cracked a Noah Bo Naylor's Superfractor. That was in an FCG. It was a 9 centering as well with 9 5s all the way around. So this was another example of, hey, it might be a good PSA 10 candidate. Unfortunately, it PSA 9'd. So that was on the flip. So, but I don't mind it because, again, it's a superfractor. I know people say you shouldn't, grade a superfractor. I think that's a crock of crap too. So it's like you should grade it because it's in a case. It's safe, right? So I'm a big believer in grading superfractor, especially with PSA, just because their designation is so bold and it looks different. The card hits different. So and then lastly, we also sent our buddy Andrew's Ohtani Exquisite Auto, and we sent it out on a dual grade. The dual grade being we didn't actually grade the card, so it just has an authentic label, but the auto ended up 10ing, so it's in a authentic auto 10. And basically the reason for that decision that we made, and believe it or not, when Andrew bought this card, it was kind of like he got a really good deal on it. This was before the Ohtani hype, and he went after the OG, old school, exquisite, Upper Deck Goodwin.
It's a beauty.
Yeah, it's such a kind of like iconic card, especially for the LeBron and stuff like that. So having Ohtani's, when he got it shipped, and this was earlier on, it wasn't when it was worth as much as it is today, but I think he sent it in like a paper towel. Like this Ohtani Exquisite Auto, it wrapped up in a paper towel. And it's crazy. It actually, he received it damaged. So like when he bought it, it was like you could see the corners were fine, and then when he received it, it was so poorly packaged that it was actually damaged. Brutal. So like we decided, honestly, like these exquisite autos are terrible for grading. Like rarely you'll get a pretty good grade. You see a lot of sevens and 8s. This one might have been even lower, but the auto was like really, really nice. It was crisp. It was clean. It was one of the better autos. So I think now it looks phenomenal. I feel like the slab in authentic auto 10 was amazing. I will say this though. So we expressed it $150. The auto was an extra $50 or so. It was like $199, and then he got upcharged. I think it was I want to say $490 total. I could be right. Hang on, let me just double check that. It could have been $390.
Holy.
Yeah. So it was a total cost of basically the upcharge. I'm pulling up the invoice right now. But yeah. So sorry, it was $390.
Okay.
Yeah, it was $390 plus $46 to ship, so $436 US.
Wow.
To grade that Ohtani in an authentic auto 10, and John made a good point. It's like technically authentic is lower than any grade.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
Would it justify that push, that bump, right? So
PSA making money any way they can.
Yeah, and then meanwhile we spend almost $1,000 or whatever it is on grading cards, 4 cards at PSA. I send 30 something cards to SGC in the 2022 Bowman Chrome submission, and we get it back the same time. So this was like 2-week turnaround. $9 a card. So we submitted at December 31st, just right before the deadline. We got it January 15th. So 2 weeks in and out the door, 30 cards, no value, $240 for 30 cards. I spent $1,000 for 4 cards at PSA. Crazy.
There you go. So that's the difference.
That's the difference in price in PSA and SGC right there.
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. But I guess for Andrew, who has the Shohei with the authentic Auto 10,
he's
guess
pumped.
you can't complain too much because it's suddenly very, very valuable, right?
Oh, so. Yeah. And I think he got in really, really early, like stupid early. So I'm pretty sure he's happy. Even paying that grading fee, he's multiplied that card easily in terms of the current value right now.
Yeah, happy for Andrew. There you go.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for sharing. That was a pretty good submission then. It's not always the case, but good to
overall
good to
expensive, but it was a good submission. And for SGC, we did send in like our boy. We're close with Denzel Clark on Oakland Athletics.
Oh yeah.
He's a big time prospect. I think he's going to be a superstar in the big leagues. But we sent the green atomic and gold shimmer auto. His Bowman chromes were out for the first time. His autos in 2022, and we both gemmed both 10s. So which is nice. We're pretty happy with that. So that was the highlight of the PSA SGC grading, and especially at that price that SGC had, for sure.
Oh yeah, that's a beauty. Yeah, and especially with the green, the Oakland, he's an Oakland Athletics prospect, right?
So color match.
Love the color match. Yeah,
100%.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. I hope I submitted the Wander Franco Exquisite Collection, and I did the authentic, and I'm not sure if. No, I don't think I even graded the auto. I just wanted an authentic slab. And we'll get to that later on in the show about PSA authentic slabs, because that's been a point of controversy lately. But I did value. I wish I did express like you did, because you got it back already. I'm still waiting for mine, so we'll see.
And they might upcharge you for that too, right?
Oh man, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. So we'll see. When that comes in, I'll let you guys know on the pod. But we'll see. All right. Let's move on now to hobby headlines. Okay, so one of the questions we get now and then as hobby content creators is whether we do this full time. And I assume the answer for most people would be no. It's just something you do for fun on the side. And that was certainly the case for me when I got back into the hobby about 5-6 years ago. But after a couple of years, I was lucky enough to transition into making hobby content full-time amongst other business ventures. Now, Hyung, you're an entrepreneur as well, and Integrity Sports Cards is just one of your many businesses. So I thought for this segment, we could share some of the lessons we've learned on our way to becoming content creators and just generally running our own business on a full-time basis. Again, just because I do get these questions, DMs on my Instagram account on 5Card Guys, wanting to know how they can grow their channel, grow their social media presence. So I thought maybe it'd be useful for people that want to get into this more, not just full-time, but just want to do more on the side as a side hustle to begin. So I wonder if a good place to start is something we both fundamentally agree on, which is to bring value to our audience, right? We say that all the time in our meetings. Any initial thoughts on this when we say this?
For sure. Giving value is probably the most important thing right now in even any digital marketing. Outside of cards, if you run a business, you have to kind of give value to basically identify who you are as a brand. It's a lot easier to kind of do all that up front, to do all the legwork up front so people already know what you're about, right? So if you constantly give value, people will understand that, you know what, he kind of knows his stuff, right? So it's like every day you're dropping little bits of truth that you might know because you're in a specialized field, right? So 100% give value always.
Yeah. And I think a common mistake for people that start off is like instead of bringing value from the beginning, they ask the audience for things.
100%,
right?
Yeah.
And I think with bringing value is like, what do you think would benefit the audience from the knowledge you're bringing to them?
Right.
You know, so
part of it too is like I would stick with a niche. You know, like if some guys might be, you know, more baseball related. They know the card game specifically for, let's just say, first Bowman's prospecting versus like rookie card chasing, right? So it's like you could create a channel where, you know, talk about the releases, specifically Bowman, because what that's doing is it's creating an audience that, you know, you're giving value, you're giving insight of a specific niche in the card format. I feel like those are kind of like the best channels, because now you have a specialized audience and you could kind of not necessarily see it from a sports cards perspective in general. It's more of a, if you want Bowman Chrome first, prospecting, this is the guy to kind of go to, right? And kind of focus on the niche area. And like you said it before, Gary Vee says this always with him. It's like, you never really ask for business. Businesses should be kind of like the byproduct of kind of like constantly giving value in the culture that you're kind of alluding to, and then you drop the hammer once in a while where you have a product that could help that industry usually. Right. So all my businesses too, whenever we run off a digital platform, we're releasing like a online curriculum for baseball, for instance, now. And that's one of our products that I feel like it's a very valuable product to kind of like the grassroots development. Right. So it's like we're focusing our social media attention on just giving value in terms of, insight, because what that's doing is people who see our brand, Oppo Taco, for the first time, they already get a glimpse of what we stand up for, who we are, based on the content, based on the constant, value that you keep on giving, right? So it's the culture that you're building. You're generating an audience, and then you're basically dropping them with a product eventually where they get filtered into, where you could potentially even help that community. Usually that's the combination that I like, just because they go hand in hand. It's a lot easier to market it. It doesn't feel like you're really pushing a product, and you're really giving value, right? So you see a lot of YouTubers actually do it. They're like, they push their content, they have their own niche. And then, by the way, we do have, grading submissions, like go check it out. And then it's a easy segue for those to kind of like believe in that brand, really, because they've been listening to them. And podcasts, for instance, are great too. Yeah,
exactly. And that's why we're doing this podcast. Like even now, after almost 2 years of doing the podcast, our intention is always to bring value to our listeners. We're still not monetizing off of it directly,
No, 100%.
Just letting everyone know we like to do this for fun, and and as we talk about it, as we learn more about the sports cards. And I like your point about starting with the niche. You can start with niche, and then you can always expand as you grow into knowing more about the hobby. And that's kind of what we did too. That's kind of what I personally did with my 5 Card Guys brand. It's like, like you, baseball cards was my thing, and that's where I started. My first post, I believe, was probably the Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck on my Instagram, and then I just saw what other baseball cards are out there. And then as I got into sports cards in general, I got into football, I got into basketball relatively soon after that, and then I started posting more of that as I'm learning more about those respective sports, and the sports cards in those markets as well. So
for sure.
So that's a good piece of advice there. And with podcasts, we could talk social media posts, videos, building websites. Just start with like what because it's also easier to write or to produce things that you already know about. You're not trying to think of what else what other content can I put out there, at the risk of making things up. And people, the audiences are smart enough that they know when they could see BS. So, you might as well be honest up front, and then
you got to be transparent.
What
Yeah, 100%. People see it like so easily, and I think a lot of people too, it's a matter of starting. Like they think that they have to have all these things. Like I remember when we started this podcast, like we had nothing. We didn't have one person listening. We're like, you know what? We'll see where this goes, because what happens is you start building those opportunities, right? As you build consistency, you start building those opportunities. And if I hadn't started like Oppo Taco, more like things wouldn't have happened and progressed. Even with my other businesses, they go hand in hand. Because if you just think that it's going to be, you could just, do it when you're ready, you'll never be ready. So it's like, start now, get through the ugly phases, you're going to suck. Right. So it's a matter of, seriously, just, accepting that as kind of like the growth stage. And I think a lot of people are scared of that, to be honest. They run away from it. So it's like, I encourage you to kind of like, put yourself out there, because when you do that, you start learning at warp speed.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Your point of consistency is a good one as well. I want to touch upon that too, because when you start, you just don't know what's going to happen. Like there are things you could plan for, certainly,
right.
but there's so many other things that you never plan for, and certain things happen very serendipitously,
Right.
And for example, when I started the Instagram 5-card guys again, and they just did that for a year and a half and 2, and then a friend of mine that I worked with, who's part of our sports card group, he said, I know a couple other guys that just got into sports cards. One of them happened to be you, Hyung, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And here we are. We're like, why don't we start a podcast together?
2 years later, we're still doing it, but more opportunities, right? Since then.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Like to your point, if I hadn't started the Instagram page,
right.
None of this would have happened. Maybe 100%. It would have happened some other way, but
right.
this is the surefire way that it did happen.
Right. And I know you mentioned consistency. I know it's tough. Like one of the toughest thing about content creation, and I do this outside of, sports cards, even creating sports card content is not easy. Right. But
yes.
as you do it, I think the best way to do it is create consistency, as we said. But you could you could film multiple content, within a day, for instance, where you dedicate 1 day a week, and you potentially start a podcast. Let's just say this podcast, Cards to the Moon.
Mm-hmm.
We have the option to splice up this content, right, and go into a segment where it's just literally a 10-second clip of maybe us talking about a certain card and why, right? And then you literally trim that. We were talking about this actually right before the show. You literally lay over videos, for instance, and you're able to create couple ways where you speak for hours, recording yourself through a podcast, and then you literally have a month or so worth of content through,
right.
That one episode, because you're just literally taking clips and constantly, splicing them. And then you're doing it consistently in a way where you're posting it. So you're constantly giving value. Right. So I think that's, people have the illusion of, man, it's Monday now, so I have to, set it up, set my setup up and do this every week. It's like, no, it's not how it really works. It's rarely how it works unless you're doing a live show at a specific time, right? It's like, usually go like for our podcast, it's a little different because we're in a consistent phase where we're releasing every week. We could record once a week. We don't need that much preparation to do it. So it's like kind of flows well, right?
Sure.
But a lot of the times when you're creating content, it's a lot tougher than that, right? To just, be able to every week pick something up and say, you know what, this is what I'm going to talk about. It's like, no, brainstorm it, get like 10, 15 different ideas down, maybe spend a whole day just, recording, different types of content, and then see what you have and see how you could kind of like map it out for the next month or so, right?
Yeah.
To build that consistency.
Yeah. And, like we do this podcast week after week, like you were mentioning, but for us to be consistent on like other social media platforms using the content that we produce here on this podcast,
right.
that helps us produce consistent content on those platforms, on
right.
Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, whatever those might be. So yeah, if you think your way through it, if you plan right from the beginning, it just becomes a lot easier to be more consistent. And the value of consistency is that you do see your audience grow. So like for podcasts, like people are now very used to a new episode every Tuesday. And then once we added a second episode after a year of like doing
right.
Tuesdays consistently, we could handle once a week.
Right.
We're like, maybe we could do one additional one every other week. Like we wanted to commit to a second episode based on what our schedule availability was. We didn't want to start something we couldn't do consistently.
Right.
That's why we're doing it every other week still, because we're all busy doing other things too on top of sports cards. So that's just make sure whatever you do, try to do as consistent as possible, but within your schedule. Like you might lead busy lives, like we all do, and so if it's like once every 2 weeks, that's fine.
Right.
Just do that consistently. And then when you have more time, do it once a week. And then some guys could do it daily. It's not a problem doing producing content daily, but
you're doing
as long as you're doing consistently. for Instagram and things like that. So yeah, you kind of get used to your pace as well, right? And you know what you can handle. So speaking of consistency and building audiences, as we've been able to do, fortunately, with our podcast, I think we're still running that contest. It's not too late to enter for the Stadium Club Blaster, where we just reached 1,000 subscribers, and that took about a year and a half. But that's I think a byproduct of our consistent shows that we're doing every Tuesday, every other Friday. And then once you have the audience, then you could really start to think about how to monetize. It's something we discussed as well, right? Like
100%.
As we mentioned, we're not really directly monetizing off our podcast yet, but the brand awareness that it brings to all the other stuff we're working on, that's where we are looking to monetize in, or can monetize in, because we have the ability to do that. So for example, on 5 Card Guys, I have my daily auctions page, and it's a kind of a, I get most of my revenue through affiliate marketing at the moment, whether it's through partnerships with eBay or PWCC. But people know 5 Card Guys, people know Integrity Sports Cards through our podcast, Cards to the Moon, because we're on this every week. So, build your audience first and then think about monetizing instead of the other way around.
100%.
Because I think the other way around, when you don't have an audience and you're trying to think of monetizing, is just demoralizing, because it's $0 week after week.
Yeah, that's true.
But when you build an audience, then you have something to work with.
And then there's also, like, I feel like people need to feel like they need to monetize directly. Like, if I'm putting out this content, like, I'll tell you right now, if you do a podcast, most likely you're not going to get any like money for podcasts. No matter, even with advertising, you don't want to go down that route where you're selling ad space for like $20 an episode and you're like scrounging around for kind of like what we talked about was like brand credibility. Like, these are way bigger than any small monetization amounts. This is creating a brand. This is in conjunction with like potentially doing something outside of it. And then you use your podcast as a form of communication where you could push your products, right? But ultimately, you want to be transparent so that people kind of see what your intentions are, and to make sure that you're providing value and you're credible. So it's like and this might have been on your list too, is that's why when you build that credibility, it's so much easier to do partnerships. And partnerships are so important when it comes to social media. We call it what's called influential marketing, where you partner up with other influencers that can potentially push whatever you're trying to do, and good partnerships align up depending on the background of individuals. So do your research and make sure it's a good fit with your brand and where you could potentially bring value to that person potentially, right?
Exactly. Yep. That's a good segue into what I was going to say, because with partnership and with collaborations, a lot of it is dependent on the audience you have, on the audience you built. Partners, especially bigger collaborations with companies or corporations or other influencers that are bigger than you, they like to see that there's some synergy in partnering with you based on your audience. So work on always building your audience, and that always goes back to where we started from, giving them value. So that's where you should start, and try to think like, what can I bring to the table that will bring value to potential listeners, the potential audience that you're trying to build. So that's partnerships is another way you can obviously monetize later on down the road. And I only have one more point. You might have a few others after this, but I want to bring the idea of trying new ideas all the time and not being afraid to fail.
Ooh,
right?
I like that.
It's a little bit related to what you're saying about starting. I think people are afraid to start just because they're like, oh, what if it doesn't work? Or, but what if it does work? That's
exactly.
Question, right?
And that's the thing. You'll never know, right? If you don't try, right? It's like, I think part of our society has built the culture of, always doing stuff for external pleasure or whatever, because other people are watching, therefore I do it. No, do it for yourself. Want to build, and understand that failure is just a stepping stone to success. It's like, if you don't understand success, you don't understand failure. You need both to pretty much build that perspective. And for us, like, the mindset has to always be, it's not about failing or if I fail or not. We never do anything that I consider it failing. It's a matter of pivoting and saying, you know what, I didn't have the right formula, so try again. try again until you actually, produce what you're happy with. And you've grown so much in that process through failure, through wisdom, through experience, right? That you're able to pretty much, capitalize on it. So like for me, that's the most valuable thing you could kind of go through is that beginning stage of grinding. I understand it more than I've done so many startups in terms of businesses. I've dealt with a lot of failure that, it builds character at the end of the day. It builds kind of resilience. Sure. It builds to a confidence in you that you're like, you know what? I've failed so much that I'm dead certain in what I'm doing, right? So that's the way I look at it, especially through my forms of business. Like you have to have the, kind of like the guts to be able to take that risk. But you realize that when you do that, you just literally kind of like bathe in growth, right? Which is the best. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like I listen to a lot of business podcasts as well, in addition to sports card podcasts.
Yeah.
And honestly, the commonality of all the successful entrepreneurs, business people, when I listen to their stories is the fact that they learn from their failures.
Right.
And every one of them I have not heard a successful business person that says like,
no such
I
thing.
hit it 100%. I've been, batting 1,000. I don't know what failure is like. No, that doesn't exist.
Right. It's like baseball. It's like batting average is like 30% success rate in MLB gets you the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's like business.
There you go. See, another lesson in perspective, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Try new things, like, even like small as trying a different platform, like, an example for when I started with 5 Card Guys, I actually started on Twitter, and, I built like maybe an audience of, I think I'm at, oh man, I can't remember. I want to say 3,000 followers or followers on Twitter.
Yeah.
And then, this was definitely by far the most on any platform. And then Instagram came along, and I'm like, might as well see what this Instagram's about, and just trying to figure out their platform, what's good on there, it's mostly about photos. So, okay, I'm going to post about some awesome cards I like, and
right.
and then I can find it, and you just post it, and you just don't know what's going to happen. And then next thing you know, my
That's your
Instagram's
platform.
Is that my platform? Yeah, it's over 30,000. And, if I had just stuck to Twitter thinking that this was the best it's going to get,
right?
What I would have never experienced what I've experienced in Instagram, and the cycle continues, right? Like now I'm trying TikTok, and I have about maybe almost 1,500 followers, so a lot less. But I'm learning how to produce content for that platform, and I would never think of it as a waste of time. Like some of my posts get like double-digit views, you know what I mean? Like it's I think half of that's from me just watching it multiple times.
You're like, I should change this. I'll keep it. 11 views.
Yeah, so that's exactly. And like you learn, you see what content works and what doesn't, and it's fun kind of producing content to see, I'm giving myself a lot of at-bats if you go back to baseball as an analogy, like you're trying things, and you never know which one's going to be the home run, right?
Right.
Or the double, or you just keep working at it. So so try new ideas all the time. Don't be afraid of failure. You're going to learn a lot from failure, so that's always a good thing when you're trying to build something. But yeah, I hope that's useful. I'm not sure if there's any other advice that you want to give to our listeners.
I would say if you have anything like monetization related, whether it's a product, it's like always look at it in the macro lens and saying how is this product, becoming a solution to the industry problems, right? Yes. And I believe there are a lot of problems in any industry. And it's a matter of, being creative, using technology. That's why technology is so great, is like you could use the current technology and it changes things. Like we talk about ChatGPT all the time. It's like stuff like that should be used, to, understand that, more possibilities exist. And as you spend time, it's not like products are just made like overnight and saying, oh, I have the perfect product. It's like, as you immerse yourself into the culture of sports cards, you start knowing the goods, the bads, kind of like everything. And you say, you know what? Why isn't there an app for, like, a card ladder before they existed? They're like, you should have data accessible right on your phone. So it's like they created an app that solved that problem, right? So always looking at the macroeconomics lens, saying, okay, from a business perspective, how could I, create a solution to the current problems that, my marketplace or my community is experiencing.
Yeah, 100%. And as you were saying, like even we're recording this podcast together, one thing I'm reminded of, like, it might not be for everyone. Some people could work by themselves and be accountable to themselves, but often, when you're working with people, like-minded people, like, with this podcast, with you, yourself, Hyung, and John, just keeping each other accountable to doing it on a weekly basis, it becomes easier when you're like, oh, we dedicated this time to work on it together.
Yeah.
Right? So there are certain projects you just probably would benefit from having a partner or someone to collaborate with on a consistent basis. So if you could find one of those guys or one of those girls in your part of the business that you're trying to run, that's probably really helpful. Accountability is a big thing too.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah. So again, hope that was some help and encouragement to those who are looking to start their own hobby business or just becoming a content creator. We hope many of you do, because that's just another way, I think, to keep more collectors engaged in the hobby. We need more of you guys creating content. There's space for everyone.
For sure.
So yeah, love to see you in this space as well. Okay, next we got another round of overrated, underrated. And the theme is parallels, part 3. We've done this a couple times before, but the fact that this is our third time doing this segment with parallels as a theme just shows you how many parallels there are in the sports card world. So I got 5 more, and I'm curious to see what you say, Hyung, for this segment. All right, so let's start with this, because I just noted this. I think this came out a year ago, but I've only discovered it this year. I'm talking about the Red Lava number to 5. I think it's a Bowman Chrome
thing, yeah.
Yeah, Red Lava. What do you think? We have Red Shimmer. We have.
It's just ridiculous.
I did an Instagram reel on this because I noticed that there's a lot of red parallels numbered to 5. Red Lava, Red Shimmer, Red Wave. Yeah. And
red,
then you got
True Red, and then
True
Red Sapphire.
Red Sapphire. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I like reds in general because they're out of 5. Like, to me,
yeah,
I don't care what red they are. Like, if it was an orange lava, it's like, I would be like, you know what?
That's
overrated.
Fire. Come on. Oh, really?
Overrated. Yeah. I would say orange. I think red lava is fire. Like literally. True. But it's like, lava, right. It's red, which is out of 5. So I'm not gonna lie, I don't love the shimmers, like I said, and lavas, but I'm not gonna hate on it as well. Like, people like absolutely hate on it, so I could see that it is underrated in a sense. But with this, I believe everybody does have the hype of, oh, it's a red, so it should be worth like $20,000, right? So I'm gonna say it's slightly overrated.
Okay.
True red's where it's at.
Of
premium prices.
Yeah, you can't be True Red.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is a tough one because I actually love the look of Red Lava. It looks pretty nice, like I don't mind the look. And you mentioned orange lava, like red, orange. I like both of them because, lava is fire and red and orange is associated with fire. So I like that kind of match. But I'm with you. Like, I think the prices that Red Lava is already commanding for some of these cards, it's like a half step from True Red, which I don't think it should be. Right? So I'm going to say slightly overrated as well. Okay, this next one, actually, we had an interesting conversation from our WhatsApp sports group when the, was it the J-Rod?
J-Rod
the J-Rod Clear popped up, and I think that's a Tops from the top set. It's numbered to 10.
Tops update, yeah.
Tops update, sorry. Yeah. And so we talked about the Clear Parallel. What do you think?
You know what I'm going to say? I own Louis Robert Clear, PSA 9. I've pulled one Clear in my whole life, and they are impossible to pull because they are the highest paper parallel, right? So it's the next highest after the camo, Father's Day, Mother's Day 50, and then camo's 25, and then you have the Clear at 10, and then you have your platinum 101. So the Clears are super, super rare. I think they do command like a ridiculous premium, but they are beautiful cards. So for me, I think they're super undervalued because you never see them, and you know, people really don't chase them either. I'd say it's not like, oh, the clear is the first thing I want, the first parallel. People would rather the black or the Independence Day or even Father's Day, Mother's Day, right? And then they find a clear and they're like, oh, it's too expensive. Everybody wants the moon for it, so it's like it's very difficult to get comps. But I think in general in the hobby, I think hobbyists love clear. I think it's one of the most desired parallel. But ever since the whole flipping world came in, clears kind of got disappeared because it's a paper parallel, and paper parallel gets, I guess, a little less love, especially the newer designs in 2020, from 2020, 2021, 2022. I thought the paper designs were absolutely an embarrassment to tops. I shouldn't say absolute embarrassment, but compared to 2019 and 2018, you know, the paper parallels were really different, right? So I think clears in general are underrated, even though they command a high price. And I know on our group chat we said, you know, they're impossible to sell, and or something like that, right? It was impossible to sell, but you know, they're worth it or something like that, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think one of us said for flippers it's the worst parallel.
It's the worst parallel for flippers. Yeah.
Yeah, clears, I don't know, it's underrated in a way because it kind of is under the radar, like you mentioned, for a lot of collectors. But like when I see it pop up, I'm a little, if I'm honest, I'm a little underwhelmed because I don't think I've ever seen a clear in person. I feel like I would change my mind if I held a clear.
Next time you're in the office,
show me.
Yeah, I'm gonna show you. Everybody who holds a clear, they change their mind.
All right,
instantly.
All right.
And here's why. I will tell you why. So the thing that got me on clears was the Acuna. So like you had back in 2018, you had the chase. Like what was the Acuna's rookie card? True rookie card. SP bat down. You're like, no, that wasn't a true rookie card. Yes, that was the first release series too. There's all these like ridiculous debates. Anyways, a lot of people thought Topps Update was, you know, the true flagship because it has its parallels, you know, has the paper parallels. And then that year was phenomenal. You're talking everybody's after Soto, Ohtani, Gleyber Torres at the time, Acuna. The Independence parallel was ridiculous. The black parallel was ridiculous. Even the golds, right? So, clears are, basically the Acuna. When I seen one of those, I didn't see a clear before, and I seen a Acuna clear. And just because you're so used to that base image, and you're in awe of all the parallels. So at the time, it was impossible to get even like a black Acuna black in paper, right? Out of 67, like you see one for sale at the time. It was like $5,000. People are like, that's crazy, like that's insane, like no one's gonna ever pay for it. And then boom, you see the Acuna clear, and it's such an iconic card. But then on the reverse side, obviously it's acetate, so it's like it's like literally the back image of that card. So it becomes such a cool card in such an iconic, mass printed base card, right? That you're looking for like a cool parallel. So that's why I think the Independence Day held a huge value in 2018 with Acuna. Same with the black, which is ridiculous. Camo as well, but not as much. But then the clear, we were talking about another level. Like nobody would sell the Acuna clear for less than 10K at the time, right? So that's where it was kind of like a wow factor for me. I've always chased it. I've seen the Tatis clear that I kind of like had the chance to pull the trigger at like 3K, and I didn't. And I wish I did at the time, right? Because I think that card is worth a lot more than that. But that's why I like clears personally.
No, I like that background. You know what? I gotta see it. So until I see it,
you gotta see it.
Next time I come into the studio, I might change my mind. But right now, I think it's overrated. You know, because the pictures, they just don't do it justice.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I will say they are impossible to gem because of surface, because of the acetate. So most have surface issues. So it's like when you see a clear, that's usually the issue with it. They probably won't be a 10. Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. All right, let's go on to another Topps parallel, the Platinum 1 of 1. I bring this up because there was a J-Rod that's just listed on eBay, his Platinum 1 of 1, and just, overrated or underrated? I want to hear you first.
Woo. Okay, I was well, first I would say overrated in terms of the look of the card. I absolutely despise the fact that they say platinum. It looks like a gray printed, Epson printed on the inkjet here. Come on, it's like this is the platinum. Make it like when you pull a superfractor, you have that wow. It's like, you see the superfractor, you're like, okay, this is a card. This is a 1 of 1. You pull a platinum. I know many times where I actually pulled a couple platinums. You kind of like skim through it. You're like, oh, it's not overwhelming. And you're like, oh my God, this is a 1 of 1, right? So I'm underwhelmed with the platinum. I think Topps could do a way better job with it. So I'm going to say overrated. But just remember, like I was looking at prices today on Mike Trout cards, and a black BGS 9 or something like that sold for $60K or something like that.
Okay. The
last sale. There's not too many sales, right? So I'm thinking, man, that J-Rod 1 of 1 might be like an absolute monster card, because when the owner, I've seen it, he's in our forums too on Facebook. He listed it for 60,000 or best offer. I think he has it up on eBay for 99 or best offer or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the card has huge potential in that sense. I'm not saying it's overrated in that sense. I think it's going to fetch all the dollars that it commands. I just think it's overrated in terms of if that's the 1 of 1. It's not even, do you know how Panini writes 1 of 1? Like Topps just stamps it like 1/1, and then it's like underwhelming gray tones. It's like overrated, man.
Yeah. I'm not gonna take too much time on this. I agree with you 100%. Just the ugly gray border doesn't even look platinum.
Yeah.
And yet it commands these ridiculous prices. It's a 1 of 1, but the look of it definitely underwhelming. So I'm going to say it's overrated as well. All right, we're going to talk about a couple more 1 of 1s, both in the Prizm sets, mostly for basketball. Nebula 1 of 1.
This one's a tough one for me. It's like I looked at eBay for some Nebulas, and I was like, man, I don't know if I would buy a 1 of 1 Nebula. It's very underwhelming in my opinion. And I've seen a Nebula in person though. They are beautiful cards. I will say they are beautiful cards. The problem is you don't know that they're 1 of 1s. Like to me, it's like staple superfractors are 1 of 1, right? In basketball, I guess Prizm it'd be black.
Right.
Or something like that. Sometimes it's black shimmer in baseball sometimes. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Nebula, to be honest. I'm going to say overrated.
Okay. I'm going to opposite. I think it's underrated. Nebula is beautiful looking card, man.
It is a beautiful looking card.
I feel like Nebula is getting a little bit more traction these days, I saw the picture of the Luka Doncic silver Nebula Prizm, the 2018, looks amazing. Like that's almost a modern iconic card now. And I think I don't know. I get the feeling that more basketball card collectors specifically know that the Nebula is 1 of 1. So I love the look and I love the shine on it, and I just think it's distinctively 1 of 1, unlike the platinum 1 of 1 we just talked about. So I'm gonna say it's underrated for the Nebula 1 of 1. But the other one, you kind of mentioned the black Prizm, which is also 1 of 1. Do you think that's overrated or underrated?
Are we talking about Prizm blacks?
Yes.
Yeah. Prizm. Oh man, have you seen the Luka Black Prizm? It is disgusting. Like I just had seen images of it. Yeah. I like the images of it, right?
Right.
So it's like for me, the Black Prizm is like the card to get in Prizm. Like that's like equivalent to Superfractor in my opinion. And like to me, those are classic 1 of 1 paninis, right? You look at any big 1 of 1s. They're not the waves, they're not nebulas, they're not any fancy stuff. It's just straight up black, clean look, especially on the Prizm. I'm a huge fan. So I'm going to say like it's probably overrated in general, but I'm going to still say it's underrated because it commands that as kind of like the Superfractor in Topps Chrome, right? So I see it the same way. It's the Prizm Black, and that's that's the holy grail.
Yeah, it's definitely. Well, I think there's a story behind whether the Black Prizm 1 of 1 has actually been pulled, and no one's claiming it yet. But I don't know if maybe it's because I come from collecting baseball cards, and the black parallels aren't 1 of 1s, right? For baseball, like for Topps or for Bowman. Anyway, I know it's not 1 of 1. So to see Prizm with a black parallel being a 1 of 1, I just don't equate it. Like, it's the opposite of what I feel like the Nebula is. Like, Nebula for me, 1 of 1. It's already ingrained in my mind. Where if I ever saw Black Prizm, I'm like, oh, okay, that's numbered to 50 probably, or you know. So maybe I'm not as familiar as the Prizm sets and all the parallels associated with, especially with basketball Prizm. So I'm gonna say it's overrated for that reason. But you know what? Since we're both on opposite sides of Nebula and Black Prizms, I'm gonna put a poll up when this episode comes out, and we'll see what people say. I'm interested.
The classic. It's the classic. It's like the superfractor, man. You can't hate on the superfractor.
No, I'm definitely not hating on the superfractor, but I don't know if I put the Black Prizm up there with it. But yeah, to each their own. All right, that is another round of overrated, underrated. I'm sure we'll have a round or part 4 of parallels because there's so much more. And I always like doing parallel themes, so we'll do that again sometime with when Johnny's back. All right, we'll finish off the show with our regular weekly segment we call Pick One. And if you're joining us for the first time, this is a segment where each of us chooses 2 cards and then we debate which one we would rather invest in. All right, so as usual, Hyung, do you want to start things off?
Sure. We're sticking with obviously baseball here.
Yeah.
And I was actually going a little trout hunting because I've been looking at prices, just even on Card Ladder. I've been looking at kind of like the trends and stuff. I think it's a pretty good time to buy. I think update PSA 10s are pretty strong. I thought it would go down to 1,000. It seems like 1,500 is kind of like that support. Even for the Topps update, it's a pop 5,000, right? So for me, that's really scary. So I'm staying off Mike Trout's. I'm looking at more of the rare parallels that kind of fell off the face, maybe good values, right? So if I'm in the market for a Mike Trout, okay, I basically, set the budget at around, and I'm not saying that I am in the market, but I picked 2 cards that I was like, what would you kind of spend $4,000 if your budget was like that 4,000 and you had to come under that $4,000 budget? Okay. So the first card I have comes from 2011 Topps update. But the Cognac Diamond Anniversary. So the diamond is the silver looking one. This is the Cognac, the more bronze looking one. Yep. A BGS 9.5. So this was a min gem though. It's a pop 121 in a BGS 9.5. Okay. And last sold for $3,994 on Card Ladder, January 7th. Okay. I'm going to pair that up with another trout that I personally like. It's one of my favorite trouts. It's basically 2011 Bowman Chrome Mike Trout refractor. So it's the image where he's standing tall. I personally believe this is his first released rookie card. I believe. I didn't do any research on it, but it makes sense because Topps update would have came at the end of the year. Bowman Chrome releases sometime in the summer, right? And then you have your Bowman draft at the end of the year, right? So you have where he's more crouched down. This is the image where he's standing tall. I believe they're both 175, but this is card number 175, the refractor PSA 10. It sold for $3,720 with a pop of 121. So they're both 121. Wow, okay. Population report. This is a PSA 10 refractor though in the Bowman Chrome. So would you go the BGS 9.5 Cognac update paper, or would you go the Bowman Chrome refractor?
Yeah, there's a couple of different factors at play here, right? PSA versus BGS, of course. Paper versus Chrome. Yeah, I think for me it's personal preference, and I think easily for me I'm choosing the Cognac Diamond Anniversary. Really? I just think that Topps update is iconic for one of Mike Trout's most iconic rookie cards. Sure. Other than the Bowman Chrome Auto, right? I think it's up there. And I agree with you. I like the Topps update, but the pop count's too high. I think that could be very volatile. So, the next best thing is to find a more rare parallel. Right. Cognac Diamond, I don't mind the look at all. I like that, the border and the background. And, for the other one, like, I get what you're saying about this might be the first rookie card for Trout, but I don't know if the hobby recognizes that or realizes that. So for me, like, certainly I didn't, right? So it doesn't have that much appeal to me in that sense. So for me, I like the Cognac Diamond Topps update. It's a beauty.
Interesting.
And I don't mind BGS 9.5. You guys know.
Nice. For me, I think I go back and forth with this actually. But I think I really like the Trout, the Bowman Chrome. Just the card in general. I think it's an underrated card because of the pop count in general. It's a lower produced, and that's what alluded me to kind of alternatives in that 2011 update. It's like, should I go paper? Should I go gold? Should I go, even Target Red at the time was affordable, right? So like those parallels really got my attention, and then realizing that there's not too many parallel options. For Chrome, there's only there's two refractors, which is the Bowman Draft Chrome and also the Bowman Chrome we're talking about. So for me, I like the Bowman Chrome card better, to be honest. It's something that I always kind of like. I like the image better. I like the card better. I like that it's a refractor. I like that it's PSA 10. So I'm going to actually choose the Bowman Chrome refractor PSA 10. All right. Yeah. Okay.
We'll ask John next week. He'll break the tie for us.
Yeah, for sure.
What he says. All right. That's a good one. I like it. Okay, so I'm going to do something a little bit different for my pick one. And this is because I put a post of as I was mentioning earlier, the J-Rod 1 of 1 Platinum on my Instagram feed this morning. And it was graded a PSA Authentic. And I didn't know that was going to bring a lot of comments on this post because people just don't like. There are some people that really don't like the PSA Authentic on the 1 of 1. And then there are people that said, it's the reason why we're assuming the seller, potential seller, is looking decided to do the PSA Authentic was maybe there was some damage to it. Kind of like the Shohei, kind of like my Wander Franco, you think it's not going to grade well. So, if it came back a PSA 7, right? That's why I want to compare my pick one to. Would you rather have a PSA 7 or a PSA Authentic?
Ooh. You know what? If you said anything lower than a 7, I would have said Authentic. But I think 7 is the marker. I think with a 1 of 1, I think you're okay there. I think a lot of and I don't love the Authentic label by itself. Like, I feel like Authentic Auto 10 makes sense, but just Authentic, it's just like, okay, definitely it's damaged. So I could assume that it's a PSA 4 or PSA 3. So PSA 7 is not really that bad. It's still in relatively decent condition, especially if it's paper. And, paper is impossible to gem, especially if it's the 1 of 1. You have only one chance to gem that card, and it depends on how it came from factory, right? So I'm going to say PSA 7. I don't mind that, but anything underneath, I think I would have picked Authentic.
Okay, interesting.
What are the comments saying? I didn't check it.
Some people really don't like PSA Authentic. And no one's really saying, like, what's the line? Is it PSA 7, PSA 6, PSA 8, right? So, but yeah, I mean, definitely the most vocal are the ones that say, why did you do PSA Authentic for this 1 of 1? Or even more on the side, it's like, why bother grading? That's another question altogether. Why bother grading a 1 of 1? You know what I mean? Because it's a one of a kind. Well, and I stand aside. I don't mind slabbing 1 of 1s for protection, and just even the Authentic. You want to make sure it's legit, so I don't mind it. But anyway, that's another question altogether. But for this one, PSA Authentic versus PSA 7, I think my line is a bit higher than yours. I think it's a PSA 8. So my heart would drop, I think, if I saw PSA 7 on a 1 of 1. And knowing that, sure, it could have easily been a 4 or 5. But I think my line is definitely an 8 in terms of value. Like, I feel like it drops a lot from a 9 to 8. you know? So I'm going to say I don't mind the PSA Authentic. And, you know, people I'm sure will assume that it's really damaged, but maybe it's just for a one of one, you just want to
does it really matter at that point, right? Like, it's a one of one. I get
Right.
that. I get that you want a PSA 10, but like it's a one of one, right?
So why bother slabbing? Well, this is a circular argument here.
No, well then why bother slabbing it? Is because let's just say, you know, you drop
Right.
your card, or like it's just not protected at the end of the day, and that's why you slab a card in general. It's like, why wouldn't you, right? But I do enjoy, what I'm enjoying a lot is non-slab cards. I'll be honest with you.
Interesting.
For me, I enjoy the card. I put it in a one touch. You know, I'm not going to grade it, and that, you know what? Don't need to grade it. I'm not going to sell it. I'm not like, I care about like an apps, especially if it's a super, super rare card.
Right.
I don't mind not grading it too, if I'm going to keep it in my PC, right? So I have a bunch of like players that I coached, for instance. They're Bowman First Chrome. Like, I have tons of, you know, guys that have their Bowman First Chrome. I just collect all of them, like the rare ones, and then I don't grade them because financially they're not worth grading.
Right.
I'm kind of saying they're not worth grading, right? But
Right.
yeah, essentially that's where
it,
where I come down to it, right? So I don't mind enjoying the card in the one touch, 100%.
I like that. Yeah, let's get more people to agree with us and rebel against these grading companies that are just making way too much money off of us.
And we're gonna sell one touches. That's 5 Card Guys' product.
Yeah. Don't tell them our business plan yet. All right, that's a good way to end this show. Thanks again for all our listeners and subscribers to Cards to the Moon. We appreciate you guys. If you haven't already, we really appreciate you if you gave us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcast. And we'll see you again real soon. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5Card Guys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at Trade You at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.